All right. I could not hardly believe the other day when I saw the Swiss franc was, I don't know, I think 1.2 or 1.1, something like that. But I can remember where you got, $1 would buy you 4 Swiss francs. And now is the Swiss franc over $1 now?
Well, it's been as low as 98.
Right.
It's been, it's been as high as 98 and as low as 121.5 in the last year. And it's 116 approximately right now, but it's going to go up again to 99, 98, whether the Swiss government likes it or not.
Okay, in other words, it'll be worth more than $1 then at that point.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, fine. Well, of course, I think that it's just amazing as you see all of these things unfolding. And of course, what's happening, of course, is tremendous uncertainty there in Europe. And certainly it's very, very hard to be importing and exporting with certainly currencies that are fluctuating so widely. And I noticed in one of your recent newsletters you talked about how the banks were no longer writing letters of credit. Does that have
Well, they're not writing very many of them, and that's part of the reason why the Baltic Dry Index has dropped from about 90%. Now, it's rallied back in the last few months from its low, but goods are sitting around waiting to be shipped, and the banks are not giving letters of credit.
So why aren't they giving letters of credit?
Because they want to collapse, that's why.
Well, of course, that's the logical, that's what I would think, but there must be some justification for it.
No.
Okay, fine.
The money's tight, and we got to do this, that, or the other thing.
Hold that thought, we'll be right back, okay? Well, this is Dr. Stan, and of course our guest is Bob Chapman. And Bob just actually reminded me of something I really hadn't even thought of. And that is the one reason why we've seen a breakdown of international trade, is the banks refuse to write letters of credit. Would you like to explain to our listeners what a letter of credit is and why the refusal of the banks to write the letters of credit is one of the major reasons why international trade has collapsed?
Yes. And let's say that Stan Yifong Dong is in Shanghai, and he makes widgets. And Bob Chapman is in Los Angeles, and he buys widgets. And Mr. Chapman wants to buy 1 million widgets. And the normal procedure is that the bank in the United States will issue a letter of credit to a bank in Shanghai, and with that letter of credit, which is a guarantee that the amount of money would be paid, the bank in Shanghai releases the manufacturer and says, go ahead and ship. And he puts it in containers and puts it on the ship, and off it goes. And it's just a guarantee that the money will be put up. And that's not happening because companies would normally get letters of credit from banks, and they would conduct business that way because they may not have the capital to do it otherwise.
Well, I think the thing is that Bob Chapman doesn't trust that fellow over in Shanghai, and the guy in Shanghai doesn't trust Bob Chapman. He's not going to ship the goods until he has the money in hand, and Bob is certainly not going to send him the money because he doesn't necessarily trust him. And so the whole thing was then the banks. The banks took care of it, and the banks had the money on deposit and guaranteed the payment. If Mr. Wu ships the widgets to Bob, and as soon as Bob gets the widgets, he says, go ahead and pay Mr. Wu. And so that was how the trade was carried out. But when banks stopped, issuing letters of credit, then it laid the foundation for the collapse of international trade. Would that be a good explanation, Bob?
Yes. And the basics to that were that it was preceded by the imposition of free trade, globalization, offshoring, and outsourcing. And that ripped the heart out of manufacturing so that we only manufacture 11% of what we do now consumed now. And it used to be 28% in 1980. And so they've deliberately wrecked the ability to manufacture in a big way, with lots of people out of work, over 5 million. And these were good-paying jobs that paid over $30 an hour. And now those don't exist anymore, and we have to buy from other people. Well, I don't know whether other people really want to sell to us anymore, because do they want dollars, and can they pay? I mean, America.
And I think really, basically, this is all part of the plan for globalization to transfer the manufacturing and the wealth of the United States overseas. And it is part of a plan. It's part of a plan for distribution of wealth throughout the world. But they can't tell the American people that. In fact, a fascinating program on CBS 60 Minutes last night, when Leslie Stahl was interviewing some fellow who ran a steel plant, and he was in favor of terrorists and protecting our jobs. And Leslie drew back and said, "Why, you are a protectionist." And the fellow said, "No, I'm not a protectionist. I just want to have the jobs here." "No, you are a protectionist," she said. And what he should have said was, "Sure, I want to protect jobs. I want to keep our living standards up. And you as a globalist want to destroy this country. Is that what you really want, Leslie?" But he was too nice to say that. He just says, the whole system doesn't work, because a fair trade or free trade means that the Japanese, the Chinese are subsidizing their steel, and they're dumping it over here because they want to protect their country, and every other country in the world is protecting their country and subsidizing their goods in one way or another. And it is simply the globalists in our country intent upon impoverishing our people, who are transferring our wealth to other countries, and most people have no idea what's going on. Bob?
Well, I'll give you a good one.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, the S&P 500, many of them are transnational conglomerates run by the elitists. 40% of the earnings of the S&P 500 come from global trade. And global trade is falling away very, very fast. And that means that their earnings are going to get absolutely creamed.
Well, I think that, of course, we've been doing everything we could to encourage the companies to move overseas. They can go over there. They don't have to pay any taxes. I sure like not have to pay any income tax. But if you're a corporation, you move your factory to China, you get rewarded. Why would you do something like that?
Well, if you noticed in my last issue, word is going around Washington again that they want another one of these beauties.
Well, this is Dr. Stan. Bob, you go right ahead. Would you mind repeating what you said so our listeners can hear? Go ahead.
If you remember, 4 years ago, they allowed these transnational conglomerates to bring home earnings that they were holding offshore. And we're looking at a 5.25% tax instead of 33% on the proviso they would create jobs. Well, they didn't create any jobs. They just brought the money back, and it was a sweetheart deal. They want to do it again. Last time it was for $350 billion. This time they want it for over $500 billion.
But because they're not going to use it to make jobs, because they don't want to make jobs. They don't want the American workers to do well. This is a big problem, and they're succeeding very well. They're succeeding very well in impoverishing an awful lot of people over in this country.
And that's the name of the game, because they want to have us in a position, and everybody else in the world for that matter, in a position where we're at the mercy of these people. And they want us to be forced to accept their world government and their world currency and their satanic new world order.
Well, I hope you're getting that message out on everybody's program, because I think it's an important message, and I know you're reaching an awful lot of people, Bob.
Well, I talk about it on every program, and for good reason. It's the heart of the matter.
Right, it sure is.
It's the fight between good and evil, and I found that out finally in 1967. I became involved in this thought process in 1960.